Welcome to Grief Sucks, Life After Loss, where we talk all things grief. Thanks for being with us today, and we hope you enjoy this episode. Hi, Tiffany. Thanks for being here with us today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Could you tell everybody what you do and how you help people?
Yeah, sure. So I am an energy healer. I am a speaker and a podcaster, and there's a couple of things that I do, but largely they all come together in this big, love, right? Because that's really the cornerstone of who we are. And so, when we go to energy healing, right? That's to suggest that that we have that love for ourselves. And I know that may sound a little harsh, right? But in order for us to want to do better and then to commit to doing better, it takes a lot of devotion, right? And that again comes back to the love. And then through speaking and podcasting and writing, I'm all here to, help be a conduit, to help be a guide so that, that next message that you hear could be that one that really sends you down, the next version or the next level of your own individual journey through coming back to yourself. Because that's really what it all stems from, too, is that invitation to come back home.
Can you give a little bit insight? What is energy healing?
Sure. Yeah. So, energy healing, we all have programs that we've sort of unintentionally, I'll use the phrase consumed, right? But they happen around us, right? These programs happen. We also have wounds, and then we also have baggage, so to speak, from our past life karma as well as our ancestral DNA. So we might be coming here to our current life with something that feels very scary, but we don't really even know why. Like there's a trauma there, but there's nothing that we can think of that was the impetus towards it, perhaps in this current life. And then there are things that do happen in this current life, right? That we actually know, right? For instance, let's just say that, you're 3 years old, you're in the back seat of your parents' car and a car hits you. And in that 3-year-old young mind, the color of the car is red. And here you are, let's say 20, 30 some odd years later. And when you see a red car, your nervous system is becoming engaged because that trauma, right, is stored in our body. And so when we bump up against something that challenges that trauma, we're often so far away from the original incident that it leaves us a little curious or just reactive in general, right? Because when our nervous system is engaged, that means that, our nervous system is saying, hey, we're unsafe. And you may look around and say, but everything's pretty benign, right? There's nothing really happening because we forgot that, 20 years ago, someone challenged your sense of self. And now it's happening again. And so our traumas are stored in our energy body, right? We're all energies, and they're stored in our organs as well. And so through tapping, through thought field therapy, you can release these denser traumas, these programs, these wounds that don't serve us anymore. Release so that you can go back to responding. Or it might be the first time where you respond, where you bump up against that trauma or that wound, and you're like, yeah, okay, I did it. And I'll use an example. I'll use myself as an example. I was afraid of wind through most of my life. As a matter of fact, about 41 years of it. And I couldn't tell you why. I just know as a child, when it was windy out, I'd be hiding. I often slept in the hall. Like nobody really even knew that I was so disturbed by wind, especially at night. Nothing had happened to me, right? I couldn't take it to anything that had ever happened to me. I just knew that it was a great fear. And so I do a fair amount of backpacking and hiking outdoors, which doesn't always feel good when you have a fear of wind.
Yeah.
And so it was this summer, and I was I sleep in a hammock outdoors, and it was a thunderstorm, and it was crazy, and I was quite fearful. And in that moment, I turned on my headlamp, I got out my notebook, and I started writing down the programs, because that's really where our information comes from. Like, what is it? It's the sound, it's the fear, right? And so I'm writing down all these things, and in my hammock, I'm releasing them. And about 3 to 4 weeks later, I was in the woods again, and it was another windy evening. And all of a sudden, I realized, as I'm smiling, okay, I'm not afraid anymore. And it was so peaceful, and it was so powerful because deeply empowering when we can transmute these wounds, right? Lovingly to ourselves and say, you no longer serve me. I'm lovingly releasing you. And then they do. And you get to respond to something like the wind in a very peaceful, harmonious manner, which invites, more space within us, more spaciousness.
How is it that you trying to think of how is it that you help others deal with these feelings or their blockages or things like that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. When it comes to, every individual client, right, is
Hmm.
is requiring something different, but what stays the same is what's going on, why are you here? And a lot of times, right, let's just say if it's an issue of self-worth, right? Well, you might come to me and say, well, I just don't feel worthy. It's a great place to start. Most of us don't feel worthy, right? If we really break that down, but it's like an onion, right? So we really have to find the core of the wound to that. We can clear the worthiness, right? But there's so many other tentacles that come along with that. And so it does take a bit of work, especially it's a very deep wound. But I'm simply a guide, right? So let's just say, Linda, if I'm working with you, then I'm using your energy to guide the entire process, right? Even including, you might come and say, no, this is what I want to work on, Tiffany, right? And then I might say, well, how about this? Because this is what your energy is telling me
Hmm.
that's the highest priority. And
Right.
so we can do it like that. So it's really with the individual in mind. And then I guide you again using your own energies to release those energies through some subtle subconscious shifting, because our subconscious believes one thing, and it's very hard to consciously change that. But if we focus enough on the wound, if we feel the wound, and through the gentle subtle subconscious shifting with the tapping, it does actually release. I like to give the example of, like, if it's like your fist, let's say again, that self-worth, right? If we really get to the core of that, these are the dense energies that exist in your nervous system, in your body. And when we release those traumas or those wounds, the energy can't be created nor destroyed, but it can be separated. And that's the best way that I can describe it. So that this intense energy, right, is gone, right? Like a lot of us have issues with control, right? Where we want to control. Oftentimes we don't see it in the moment. And I say this with so much love and compassion, because I've controlled a lot in my life that really I had no business controlling, right? But we want to control our children, we want to control our spouses, we want to control the weather, we want to control the guy in front of us in traffic, right?
Yeah.
But all of those are futile. It's just resistance. And so if we look at areas of control, what are we trying to control? There's huge insight into these programs in our life where we hold on so deeply, we're reactive. And I always say, just get curious, because there's a reason there, right? Is it because my mom used to talk to me this way when I was, a child? Well, there you go, right? There's one way that this has kind of influenced your life, whether positive or negative, or, higher or lower, that's really, really up to you. But you can take these wounds and use them as empowerment for yourself.
When you say programs, what do you mean when you say programs? Because there's a lot of people that may listen that don't, that are new to this world. So I just want to make sure that
Sure.
everybody kind of understands, it, the wording or what you do or all of that stuff. Some people may be like,
For
what is
sure.
my programs?
Right, right. No, it's a really great question. It's not something you find on Netflix, right? So these
Right.
programs are these words that we say. So for instance, money doesn't go on trees. That's not words that we've come up with, right? That's something we've heard that we've now adopted unconsciously most of the time, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very common for us to be programmed into talking about the worst parts of our day instead of the best parts of our day. That's a program where we become very negative unintentionally, right? Programs can be like, a lot of times we get them from our parents, from our how we were raised. And so let's just say if your mom, didn't like her body. Now you might have some of those programs, right? Oh, you can't have too much sugar. Well, why can't you have too much sugar? And what's too much sugar? I don't know. I just know that it stresses me out, right? If there's too much sugar. These are these little programs that we carry with us. And so it's really up for us to kind of challenge some of those and, figure out where they come from and do they continue to serve us, which is probably the most important question. Does this serve me to think that money doesn't grow on trees? No, it doesn't grow on trees. But when I'm talking about that, I'm feeling this negative vibration. So therefore, it's not a good feeling. It becomes a program. It's very unconscious, right? If you grew up with somebody if your parents constantly, let's just say, vocalized how they felt about other people on the road, right? And now you do the same thing unconsciously. How we raise our children can often be very programmed where we don't have that, conscious awareness to say, wait, what is really good about what I was raised? And what are some things that I really want to shift, right? A lot of us just go into auto. Okay, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. So I'm just going to do it. And then we wind up going, actually, I don't really like my life and I'm not sure why.
Makes sense. So it's kind of the things that we've learned from the time we could learn and kind of acquired throughout our lives, been taught, things like that.
Exactly.
Okay. When it comes to the grief side of it, how can the energy work help clear emotional blockage? Because I think when we deal with grief, we definitely have some mental blockage. And often it's hard to get over that through it, whatever term we want to use. It's hard to get past that and get back into some kind of normalcy.
Yeah, and it's such a great question. When we look at what grief is, let's just think about, somebody passing in your life, because that's, I think, the most common way that we
Yeah.
can experience grief, right? And, we all have these emotions, and the best way to move through them is to feel them. But often we come up with these programs. Again, we're going back to the programs, right? If we think about death and dying, it's very dark, right? People often won't hold space for, or even those terms, unless it's in a joking way, like the hashtag I'm dead, right? Right. We might use it in a very frivolous way, but when it comes to actually understanding, death and grieving, oftentimes I find in my work that we have some deep rooted emotional wounds still attached to that other person, right? Whether it was regret,
I think
right?
that's a big one.
Or their, yeah, regret is really a huge one. Forgiveness, right? If we're holding on to, well, could we have forgiven? Why didn't we forgive? And we put all of these into this very physical space and think that that's just it. And often what I found, like, for instance, one of my really good friends' brother passed away within this year. And I reached out, very gently and said, listen, I know, I feel you're so deep in your grief, just know that there is some relief and there is some support for you, right? But what I often find is people in the throes of grief don't find themselves important enough to want to change. It's almost like that grief reminds them of whatever it is that is incomplete. And so we can't move past that. Grief can be a very beautiful thing. And I say that with so much love and compassion because it's, you're still going to hurt, right? I'm not saying we're erasing the tears that will stream down your face. My father passed away 13, 14 years ago. I have his picture on my desk. Sometimes I look at it and I'm filled with love. Other times I get a little weepy. It's okay. You just feel it and move on, because we are all existing here in this human experience. And I also find that if you can find other ways that life makes sense from grief,
Mm-hmm.
right? You can see grief as a loss in the end, or you can see it as a new beginning. And there's nothing wrong with either view, right?
Yep. And you learn a lot, I think, as long as you're willing to feel it and do the work to get through it. I think you learn a lot about yourself and maybe even a lot of things that you didn't know about yourself. And yeah, you can look at it as a new beginning. I guess I see it as you can live in the past and you can live with all of that, or you can move forward and still have a life and create a new life.
Right. And I think that that's often kind of dismissed, right? We need that attachment to the loss of the loved one or friend or whomever. We need to stay attached. Well, you can unattach and still have so much love and compassion,
Yeah,
right? And still really, learn those lessons, because that's what we're here to do. Is we're here to learn lessons and grief and death and unfortunately or fortunately, it is all a part of that. And so what happens when we deeply attach, especially in grief, and we want to hold that, close to us because that reminds us that the person is real. Yeah, we are really blocking ourselves. We really and truly are. Not just from a physical standpoint, you're blocking it from an emotional, from a spiritual. There's so many ways that we're blocking it, because it takes that love within yourself and that love to really say, this doesn't serve me, right? But I'm really open to the fact that it's a very simple concept, but it's not a very easy one to integrate.
sure. Is there any one or two things that you could suggest that maybe someone could do easily to help let that go?
Honor it and feel it truly, and get really curious about it. Get super curious if you can. We are our greatest teachers if we're open to listening, if we're open to learning, and life will go on whether we're with it or not.
Absolutely.
And so, right, it does become a choice, and you can move forward, because honestly, that's what death is about too. It's not a stop, it's a
Hmm.
continuation. It's a part of our journey, but it doesn't become our journey unless we allow it to. And, we can lovingly feel and move on without the rigidity of, again, regret. Or if I let this person go, then I'm letting them go. You're simply not, you know? Love is eternal. I have a very big knowing in myself that we all, continue to reincarnate with the people that we love the most. And so that also can be a really great comfort. I highly recommend Dr. Weiss in his books. He does a lot of past life regressions, and really it changed how I view of death so dramatically, because death is a very fearful thing in this world. Again, it comes back to the programming. If you think about what happens when somebody passes away, it's very dark.
Hmm.
It's very dark. Everyone wears black. We're mourning. Well, now if you notice, there's celebrations of life, which I very much identify with, because let's celebrate that person instead of mourning them. It's such a difference. And then it's about getting really curious about what lesson and what influence does it have over your life? Right? And finding that way. I mean, you often will find, not all, but I know a fair amount of unfortunate, moms who have lost children,
Hmm.
right? And that's a grief, right? They're all grief. It's all grief. A lot of them take their children and move forward with them, right? I know this one couple who had lost their daughter at 18. She wanted to go to build a habitat for human, in a third world country. The parents went and did that in benevolence of her, right? They created foundations. You really can create something from loss that helps to alleviate that burden that it can often feel.
Doing things in honor of those people, I think, help a lot of us. That's how my podcast came about, was to help other people in the situation because we often feel alone. And I wanted to share other people's stories so that, and, guests like you who help heal, because that's a huge important step in healing, is maybe seeking help and looking for people that can help you get through if you don't know how to do it on your own. So, yeah, I think kind of honoring them and finding things that you can do, and it doesn't even have to be big things. just little things. You might go out and do something, say, oh, you know what, they would be proud of that, or is that's something that reminded me of them, or we would have done together, or just little things like that.
For sure. We can find beauty in it, and if we are still deeply attached, it's not wrong, bad, right? There is help, and that's going back to your point, like if somebody, were to come to me and say, I'm struggling with grief. Well, we can help work through that because, again, we go back to those wounds or those programs, right? What is the regret that you feel? Because I know it's there, right?
Hmm.
And you can clear those so that when you think about it, I regret not spending enough time. It has no feeling. There's no attachment to it, right? Where it can just be a statement of fact. Yeah, I didn't spend enough time. It's okay because I am now, right? And that's really what we want to do, is to kind of have no attachment to it. And I know that that feels that the memory will be dismissed, but it's truly not. It allows you for a greater amount of love, because love is not conditional, right? But a lot of these wounds that we carry, they allow love, or they invite love to be conditional without our knowing, right? Without consciously understanding that. And so, and a lot of times we get very attached to physical things once people have passed too, right? Like you can't, like I remember my father's mother had passed away, and he was like, you can't use those mugs because if they break, that's really not the most healthy attachment to have, because there's not sure, there's a memory that can help stimulate, but the memory's there. You don't
Hmm.
need the mug, right? But we attach ourselves to these things because they are in a way to make us feel safe, but in effect, they actually don't.
Yeah, I think on that aspect, it can go either way. Some people attach themselves to things, and other people need to get rid of the things or change the things. For me, I needed to change things because that just new living room furniture, or like our bedroom, I wouldn't sleep in our bedroom for I don't even know how long. And finally one day I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna paint, I'm gonna get new furniture, I'm gonna get rid of the old, get the new, and I'm gonna make it mine. And that that one thing made a world of difference. Like, I felt like I could go in my bedroom, sleep there every night now, and I probably a solid year I didn't sleep in my room. I didn't even like to go to my room. But just little things like that, yeah, some people carry the things and like to hoard the things, if you will. And others, I
Right.
think, need to get rid of them to feel that sense of release, maybe.
Yeah. In going back to the bedroom situation too, right? That's a very real one. I mean, when my father passed away, my stepmother wouldn't she moved because she couldn't take
Mhm,
that, right? If we think about, something like a bedroom, it's the wound is still there, right? It really has less to do with the bedroom, except for now we have a physical, physical experience. And I think that that helps us keep us in that box too, right? When we think about people who have passed, anyone who has ever been to a psychic medium or has connected in some way, right? They're messages of light and love. And so if we can see, those who have passed as being free now from these physical constraints, it really helps to change our idea in the meaning of passing.
mhm.
And I think that that's really helpful when we can find the ways to feel good while working on those wounds that we carry. I had to do a great deal amount of work for the people that have passed in my life, because there are still attachments there. There are still wounds, and how do we move past them? Well, it really is to confront them and to face them and to clear them, because the person that passed doesn't want you to stay there, to stay in that, dense vibration, that the kind that wants you to attach to things, the kind that wants you to regret, the kind that doesn't want you to feel good or have a life, right? We don't know why they passed. We don't always see, and that's another thing that humans like to do. We want to know the why of everything. And
You're
sometimes we
never
just
gonna know
don't
that.
get to.
Yeah.
Right. Sometimes we do not get to. But if you can understand that, death and die, like we're all here to learn lessons. And when our lessons has been learned, well, then we move on. And we just don't know what lesson it is that we're here to learn, And if we can see it that way, if we can see it as a lesson, there's oftentimes small babies that will come in. Well, they were here to teach you something. And oftentimes we want to yell at God. We want to yell at, whomever it is that we pray to, is almost as it happened to us. And it simply didn't. It happened around us. And I think that that's another one of those woundings, right? Like it happened to me. And so now I need to be mad. I need to say that this is unjust. And I need to say all of these things. And you can, but they stop or they prolong your ability to step back into yourself.
Yeah, you have to let go at some point.
You do. You do. And honestly, if we hold on to all of these woundings, to all of this grief, to all of this suffering, well, all of a sudden our physical body is going to respond to that, right? Because I truly believe that everything emotional or everything physical first started off emotional, but we just didn't listen. We didn't know enough. We didn't honor it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't matter what you did. And I think that that's also a very important thing. It doesn't matter what you did. You knew something different now, right? To your point, you grieved the way that you knew how. Now you know something different. So you'll do it differently, right? And we don't have to regret how we did something. There's really no space for regret because we cannot change it, right? We often hold on to it because it feels like a badge that we can carry, right? But it doesn't serve anyone to hold on to regret. You didn't know what you know now, right? You look back at something and be like, wow, I guess when I was 5, I really wished I didn't do that. You didn't know what you know now. I didn't know something an hour ago that I know now.
Right.
We're in this constant evolution. And if we see it that way, it allows for so much space and peace within our life.
Let's see. Is there any suggestions that you have for people that's maybe trying to heal, or first step things that they can do, not necessarily with grief, because we all go through, a variety of things in life. I think anxiety is a big big thing with a lot of people. And now that you've explained a little bit, I'm like, so that would make sense why somebody would have so much anxiety towards a certain thing. And I think maybe a lot of times we don't look at it that way, or we just, something happens, you're like, I have no idea why I'm feeling so much of this. But the way that you explained it makes a little bit more sense now.
Yeah. And again, it just comes back to we just didn't know something that we know now. And anxiety is such a big topic nowadays, and everyone says, I'm anxious. You're not. You may be anxious at times, right?
Mhm.
And our language is wildly important. What we say matters because our subconscious pays attention. It can't discern whether I'm joking or not,
Mhm.
right? It just says you're anxious. Okay. Yep, we're going to be anxious now. That's what we are. And we're not. Anxiety to me is our inability to control something outside of ourselves. It creates resistance. And so we get anxious. I mean, you can take it to, the coworker or somebody in your family that says, here's a pen. It cannot go here because that causes me stress and anxiety. The pen needs to go here. And we often go, oh yeah, I do the same thing. And we celebrate it. But that's wounding. That's, those are, traumas, right? And it's not about the pen. It has nothing to do with the pen. We're trying to control something outside of ourselves. And that's really what that is. And so if we can see anxiety as an emotion and get curious about it, which is my exact answer to the question, which is be curious. The only way for us to change or to shift, because we can't change, we can shift when we have knowledge, right? And that doesn't mean that, okay, Tiffany, or excuse me, Linda, I'm going to tell you that, you have anxiety because you're trying to control things and you go, I had no idea. Okay, I'll stop doing that. Right?
Right.
It takes baby steps, but first and foremost is we have to be aware of it. We have to be acutely aware of it, right? It's the same reason why, drugs and alcohol and things like that, you say, well, you have a problem. And they're like, no, I don't. Because they don't know they have a problem. So it's futile if somebody doesn't know something. It's not our business. It's truly not. And so when we're trying to control something, that's where that resistance comes from. And it's all internal. And again, you can come to those programs, you can understand and be curious, ask yourself those questions. There are ways to have help, right? I'm certainly here to help, in any way that I can. And there's a lot of other gifted healers out there that can do the same thing, where it's like, we just find out where that is really like the core wound of that, you can really change that. You can really shift that. Because I can tell you, I've been doing energy work for some time now, and I'm my greatest subject. I have cleared so much. I know it works because if you saw me a year ago to now, night and day.
Mm-hmm.
Night and day. And you can find that peace inside. It's there for you to have, right? Our spirit bodies don't want us to be in grief, to be anxious, to be any of those things, because it further disconnects us from ourselves. So truly what we need to do is find a way to come back home. And it's not going to be from, Netflix. It's not going to be from TikTok. While there are some inspiring things, that's not what but when we try to, I'm going to feel something, I need the distraction, right? Instead of, I'm going to feel something. Let me get curious. That's coming home, right? Saying, oh, no, I can't. And most people won't cry in front of you. They won't show emotion because they don't know that it's safe. It's not your fault. We didn't know something, right? I mean, if I'm being completely honest, I cried for about a half hour this morning, feeling something like grief. And it's okay. It's healthy. It's not, you're going to experience it, right? But can you feel it and then move on? Then there's no attachment there. But if you feel it and you can't move on, there's an attachment. There's there's a program, right? I don't want to call it an unhealthy attachment, but it's kind of like a codependency to the grief.
Makes sense. If people would like to work with you or follow you, could you tell them where they can find you?
I can. So I can be found on TikTok, Instagram, and Facebook. Instagram and TikTok, it's under Heart in Soul Healing, because you can't heal if you don't have your heart in there. And so it's Heart and Soul Healing. And then Facebook is my name, Tiffany O'Hearn. You can also find me at www.heartinsoulhealing.com, where I have all my packages there and everything. And even if you just, message me and want to learn a little bit more, I'm happy to, jump on a call and see if it's a right fit, because healing is very intimate. It's a very intimate experience, right? And it needs us to be very vulnerable and safe. And you may not feel safe around every healer, myself included, and that's okay. But I promise you that there is someone out there for you. And maybe the message here is to find that someone. I am more than happy to guide, anyone, to the next version of themselves. But, that brings me to the other point too that I wanted to mention is, when we're getting curious, especially if it's your first time, focus on 1% better, 1% better. We live in this world of all or nothing, right? Diet starts Monday, and then Monday comes, you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm not doing that, right? We've all been there. I'm going to stop doing this in 3 days, and then we don't stop, right? So we live in a very all or nothing society, and it's okay. It's the programs, right? We go back to the program. That is definitely one of them. And so I say 1% better. Right? If you find yourself to get curious one time today, even if it's something super benign, like your kid asks you a question and you say, no. Wait, why did I say no like that? That's 1%, right? We need to come home to ourselves in order to find that space, to find that peace. And it comes with curiosity. You are your greatest teacher. All of your lessons are within. You just have to be brave enough to listen.
Tiffany, thank you for being here with us today. I will link all of your contacts in the description so everybody can just click on that and find you. And
thank you.
Is there anything you'd like to leave us with?
No, I think that just gentle reminder that we are all love, and love is eternal. And the more that we can be in that space and place of love, especially for ourselves, the greater joy and happiness we get to experience. And we should experience that. It's our right here in this human existence to experience it.
And I would like to add, it is okay to reach out for help. We find help in a variety of different ways. So it may be a healer, it may be a therapist, it may be a friend, it may be a medium, it may be walking down the street and talking to the sky. It's all fine, and asking for help, reaching out it's okay. Some people feel embarrassed or don't know where to start. And it's all part of the reason this podcast exists, is just to let everybody know that it's okay.
It's beautiful.
Well, thank you, Tiffany. I appreciate you being here with us today.
Likewise. Thank you so much to you, Linda, and the audience as well. And I wish you nothing but love and abundance.
You as well. We hope you enjoyed our conversation today. If you would like to join us on Facebook, you can find us at Grief Sucks, Life After Loss. We look forward to seeing you again.